So I'm gonna start recording. So here we go. We're live. We're broadcasting live. It's May 8th. I'm at the Marriott in Raleigh next to the convention center attending the Smart Cities Connect conference. Had the fortune of speaking in a panel with IBM and Siemens and hosted by John Howell, the Smart City Manager for Raleigh, and it was great. And what a beautiful day! A little muggy. We are in La Nina, a lot of rain going on, and so but we have a great show. We have a great guest today. John Butler is running late. For those of you that are waiting for John to play his music, we have our own King, Llewellyn King, on deck, ready to go. Things are exciting. Things are happening. The economy, housing, vehicles. Ferrari announced a new hydrogen engine. I got a ride on the new Porsche Taycan. There's a lot of stuff going on. Mobility, vertical mobility is coming. Smart cities everywhere, mini houses everywhere. Amazon is selling houses online for $20,000. I mean, it's just fascinating what's happening. The 6G standard is looming, 5G no longer. So lots of stuff going on, but I'm curious to see what our friend Llewellyn King is thinking these days about what's going on in the world.
Thank you, Andres, and hello, everybody. The world is a very disturbed place. Despite all this progress, there's a general anxiety. It's not just in the US, it's global. It's occasioned partly by the war in Ukraine, which seems to be endless and brutal and rough, and the truly awful situation in Gaza, where enormous number of deaths have taken place and more are happening every day. No resolution in sight, and basically no resolution on the horizon, maybe for decades to come. And that has an effect. Something else which goes back to what you were saying, Andres, is there's also a kind of, I detect, an anxiety about the speed of technological transfer. People are getting a little overwhelmed. They wonder, will there be a pause? Will there be a slowdown? Can you buy anything that will not be obsolete before you paid for it? Today's automobile is even if it's gasoline, it's very different and very much part of the electronic world. People say to me, new cars, I could do without the electronics, or could they just, freeze that a bit while I get peace with it? And, people don't always want the change. It's very hard to explain, but there's a certain imperialism to technology. It demands its place in the world and it finds it. Often a new product is a result of, and the ideal world is where there's a vacuum and the product fills it. Where there's no vacuum, the product must edge out something else, disruption, which we talk about in business as something very creative, but it's also destructive, and it causes anxiety. I just mention that because this underside, the underbelly of all of the excitement we talk about on this program week after week, is always about new, revolutionary. There is an underside, and that is seen in this national apprehension. Our anxiety / apprehension, whatever you wish to call it, in this country is also affected by the politics, which are for most people disagreeable. I can't find anybody with a great passion for the coming election. There are a few people who have a passion for one candidate, and not so many people with a passion for the other candidate, but a sense of resigned, what can I do, needs must. That's not good. In this country of 320 million people, is this the best we can do? Can the political class not deliver some leadership, some inspiration? One looks back on history and one sees the great presidents who have faced the great crises. And you just wonder whether the people in the pipeline now are out to the great crises. The crises are there. We have China becoming belligerent. We have Russia belligerent. We have China and Russia in some kind of cohorts. And we have troublesome North Vietnam feeding weapons to Russia to use in Ukraine, which are weapons basically used against Europe. Macron, the French president, has said that Europe is in mortal danger. That's an extraordinary thing for a French president to say. It was in an interview last week with The Economist magazine. So there's great excitement. I think this is a time of huge possibility for human beings, but there is an underside. There is fear. It can go wrong. By and large, we're better off more people are better off than they have ever been in all of human history. And that is because of technology. It's not just because of democracy, or just because of freedom, or just because of secure borders. It's also because of technology. And technology, with its superior ability in weaponology, can also be our undoing. It's a critical time, or as Johnny, when he gets there, will say, it's very, very, very interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Llewellyn, you're always keeping us abreast of what's happening with your global view, and it's interesting the sort of the cadences and the acceleration of juxtapositions and challenges and paradoxes. But we have a great guest today, and I need to introduce you to him, Pete Tseronis, founder and CEO of Dots and Bridges. And he's an interesting guy, kindred spirits to many of us in the tech world. He founded Dots and Bridges to serve as a unique nexus for connecting dots and building bridges. Moreover, the Thought Leadership Consortium embeds, Bytes, and Insight newsletter seek to humanize the thought leading individuals, organizations, and content that embody passion and purpose serving a greater good. Pete, it's a pleasure to have you today. Welcome. Tell us a bit about you and your company and your vision.
Sure. I appreciate it, Andres. And of course, Sir Llewellyn, it's always a joy to listen to you. You're so eloquent. And I'll just jump in. I mean, I like the both of you. I think we're living in this world where, technology is on everybody's mind. I think technologists, we have all become in some capacity a techie. I was at the Pentagon right out of college. I grew up in the Washington area. I always like to say I've got 4 kids, an incredible wife, 2 dogs now. And when I came out of Villanova, I was at the Pentagon in 91, and there was no internet. So aging myself, I'll be 57 here next week, but I was there before it happened. And I grew up in government, 3 years or so there at the Pentagon and DOD, then 14 at the Department of Education, then in the final 8 at the Department of Energy. And then I've been doing this Dots and Bridges thing for about 9, which has been just incredibly exhausting, exciting. And I now have this vision, a version or perspective of what it's like to be a public servant. And then now I'll call it an entrepreneurial individual, and seeing where we need to come together, right? As a company, as a country, as a business, as a world, because technology, to Llewellyn's point, is underpinning everything. Our nation's most critical sectors, what's in the news, natural disasters, the impact of, and Dots and Bridges is that. I mean, I tell the story. I thought about how do you summarize what I did for 25 years in the government, 4 administrations, working and talking in the tech space. And it can be confusing. It requires translation. And it was my wife who said, well, what are you going to call yourself? I said, I can't come up with something cool. And it was, well, what have you been doing for 25 years? I'm like, I've been a dot connecting bridge builder, and I think I help people understand tech. She goes, well, be Dots and Bridges. People get that stuff. And that's what it is. do I consult? Yeah. Do I do workshops? Do I have a newsletter? Do I do some YouTubes, Andres? It's a voice, and I lean on my own curiosity. People say, what are you reading? What are you interested in? Like Llewellyn, you can't stop. I get up every day and there's something in the news, a smart city, this, again, an environmental impact from a natural disaster. And for me, the technology side is not the problem. It's just moving at such a clip that we're learning how we can't wait for standards and things just get deployed. The Internet of Things, stuff is in our hands. Nobody generally understands when they see the terms and conditions that maybe their data and privacy are going to be, and you talk supply chain, you see what happened in Baltimore, you see what happened, in a canal, right, a year or so ago, where it was the whole world is impacted when our rivers and causeways are shut down. So I hate the phrase, something bad needs to happen for us to hopefully leverage technology for the greater good. And my opening parting shot is simply, how do we mitigate that risk to the very sectors we depend on every day? And those are those 16 critical infrastructure sectors, like the energy sector, manufacturing, food, agriculture, water, wastewater. And how do we innovate, transform? I'm a Greek in terms of, I like the power of three, but modernization, transformation, and innovation are not the same. Government, industry, and academia must work in concert, and to the benefit of society, which must be in that discussion. So for me, in short, it's how does technology that underpins the sectors that are crumbling, which is why we're seeing this and saying, how did that happen? How does it ultimately extend life, cure cancer, clean water, and the air? That's my passion. And if I can help people do that when they're selling products or selling services, I feel like I'm that chief technology officer that I was in the government for the Department of Energy and Education, being more of a connective tissue officer.
That's good. I like that. I like that. So Pete, share with us, couple of success stories, couple of projects that you can kind of walk through really quickly and say, we had this partner, customer, agency, what have you. This is what they were trying to do. This is how we went about it. This was what was the outcome? Something like that.
Sure. Well, again, back to the what is it you do here at Dots and Bridges? Say what you want. I have a website. I'm an advisor. I get hired to help companies and public sector advisory boards and maybe help companies understand, what could be a tactic for a go-to-market. I like people to understand that when it's not a buy sell, it's a seek solve. What's the problem you're trying to solve, and who is maybe seeking that solution? Back to Llewellyn, we're littered with technology. We're littered with cyber solutions. I like to think every one of my situations, Andres, is at least in my view, a success. Because I always say, after years of doing this, I can guarantee you one thing. And I say this with all confidence, I can make you smarter on the stuff I know. I've got 30 plus years in it. I can guarantee you that. Can't guarantee you a sale. Can't guarantee you a meeting. Can't guarantee you anything that really is mostly your responsibility, but I can prepare you to go in and maybe listen more actively. And when you come back, have an opportunity, whether that is to solve an agency or commercial company, a utilities solution, and be smarter. A good example is I was able to work with a law firm over the course of a year with a team of my 1099 experts on a cybersecurity assessment for a utility. And when you go in, there's a scope of work and here's what we need and deliverables, but really it was, please understand that we are going to understand your world in the utility and the operational technology jargon, again, another term, and bless you. And how are we going to implement a technology solution to mitigate that risk? And I feel like this is where the smart cities comes in, is people think there's a tool or a thing you can plug in, which is why I say you don't buy a smart city, you architect one, you architect, invest, and implement. So success for me is that I've been able to do this for almost 9 years and take care of my family, and still some days wish I was back in government doing what I do. And that was meeting everybody, learning their mission, and seeing how I can help the right people come together.
Peter, I have a question. part of the generation of anxiety and also part of the excitement for the future is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
On the one hand, it's going to do great things, especially in medicine, especially in assisting people in solving particular problems, because it brings together disparate information that you couldn't gather otherwise and allows you to let that information interact with itself to produce a solution, which is fabulous. And it's going to do it in medicine tremendously, so much so that people are talking about a life expansion to maybe 120 years or longer, because so many diseases will be conquered. However, the anxiety factor is large. It's taking jobs, it's reorganizing the workplace, and there is this sense that it could be a Frankenstein creation, that it could get away from us. I ask people in the utility industry, I say, do you think when you go to AI to operate your system, which you will do better than people, and because a utility system today has so many fragments that have to work in cohesion, that AI is like a godsend, except once you've employed it, can you actually get it back? Can you extract yourself from AI once you've embraced it? How do you say about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, it's just one of many we can wax about. I spent the last day and a half at this amazing expo in DC at the convention center, just in a room of vendors and federal agencies and nonprofits. And of course, AI is a buzzword. The executive order came out at the end of October, says a lot. Memorandum 24-10 comes out in March, and it says agencies, this is what we need. But I think I want to answer your question with something that I believe, but is written in such a way that I think may make sense. If I may, Andres, it says, AI can improve operations and deliver efficiencies across the federal government, of course, and in industry. We need to prioritize AI development and adoption for the public good, and where the technology can be helpful in understanding and tackling large societal challenges such as accessibility of government services, reducing food insecurity, and addressing climate crises, public health, and equitable outcomes. Now, when I read that, I go, AI, look, I was fortunate to live in the world of the national labs for 8 years, and I still maintain a relationship with where all this early stage technology and innovation is happening, and that's where our tax dollars go to work with research and development. I saw speaker after speaker yesterday say how AI is helping through modeling and large language modeling, developing new small modular nuclear reactors or water purification systems. And there is that fear, anxiety of AI is going to take over. It's the machines, it's the matrix. And I realized through it all, there's still the human brain, arguably the most powerful supercomputer, helping guide that development. And if somebody wants to take that approach that, oh, it's going to put me out of a job, well, I don't believe that. I think human intuition and ingenuity will always be a part of it. But the fact that a modeling, simulating digital twin, Andres, I'm sure you've done a lot of work in that space, the Internet of Things, Llewellyn, are you concerned and have anxiety, or do you have hope that the right people are actually working to solve these grand challenges? I'm in that camp. I believe that technology will help us cure cancer. I don't think pancreatic cancer one day is going to be oh boy, I better get my things in order. I don't want to hear that children are drinking bad water in Flint, Michigan. I don't want to see what I saw in Louisiana when Katrina, came on. But again, technology is an enabler. It can be something that's used for not great purposes. But ultimately, AI is the buzzword right now, and there are flavors of AI. It's almost an umbrella term, just like cybersecurity is. You have to read and understand. And I would say to your audience, read Executive Order 14028 when the Colonial Pipeline was hit, when we were introduced to the term operational technology in many circles, so that people now know that IT is a lot different than OT. And that's, to me, this continuous, you have to know what AI is and what it's not. We have to understand what governance is and why you need standards and what we need to do when they say trustworthiness of it, provenance of data. So, Llewellyn, it's a topic, when we talk critical infrastructure. What's that?
question, because we've given some definition to it, in which you separate out IT from OT, operational technology as opposed to information technology. And it's an important separation. Where the concern and where the most use that we see at the moment of AI will be an OT. But that's where, once it has been given over to AI, can you actually get the AI out of it if you decide that's what you, and this, I've asked this of a lot of people, and I've got some remarkably, some people say, yes, there's always human beings, and other people say, no, you can't. That you can actually hand whole systems over. I say it's simple, I can do it, turn the electricity off. And that's not the answer they want. It's sort of like when national labs, when I was helping them create the craters, the cooperative research agreements, I said, you know, this is a very laborious way of doing it. We can do technology transfer out of the labs very fast and very efficiently and for no cost at all. And the director of one of the very large defense labs said, how? And I said, no, you fire the 300 best people here. Technology will fly out with them, and it won't cost anybody anything, and intellectual property will mostly not be an issue. And he said, you're right, but please don't say that anymore. You know, so we're in this interesting world where, and sometimes we have a lot of siloing going on at a time when we don't need siloing. We need technology, information on technology to fly around freely and openly. Otherwise, we're going to make some huge mistakes when you, and I just wonder what your thoughts on those issues are.
Yeah, I have a lot to comment on, and again, I'm going to go back to your point. You know, people are going to have an opinion on AI, and you can say, well, this person who has got 5 PhDs really is something I'm going to believe, or somebody who is not in any sense or any manner, you know, that credentialed and can explain AI to me in a way. And that's really what I love about what I do, is I learn from so many. You know, I read. I read many pieces of paper, lots of paper, and I try to interpret. And what I've come to the conclusion is, in your case with operational technology, there are systems that will never and still haven't ever used the internet protocol. But what we're seeing is a convergence now, and I think that's where some of the anxiety happens. Is what if I'm able to plug in my device, a smart meter, a smart sensor, a synchrophaser, to use some of our utility jargon, and it can do some AI kind of device activity capability. Well, some people say, oh, that's good. I'm going to learn from the data. I'll learn things and I'll be able to see patterns, and maybe I can mitigate a brownout. Others are going to say, no way, man, there's a backdoor and some cyber person's going to get in there and take down the power grid, and then people are going to die. I mean, those are extremes. That's why I go back to, we've seen it happen. And that is, what are we doing to establish standards? Just this month, or in April, I'm sorry, the NIST, the National Institute for Standard and Technology, has a plan for global engagement on AI standards. They're asking for public comment. I don't think there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people who have all the answers. I think there are people who've never gone to college, who have thought about this and read many books, and can say, what about this scenario? And it comes back to risk mitigation. So your example, really quick, Llewellyn, and then that, I love that you brought up a utility. Control systems, SCADA, distribution control, legacy systems that have been up and running and keep our grid running. Without energy and power, bad things will happen. The question is, you don't rip and replace those tools, and you don't plug things in unless you've mitigated the risk, which is why we're seeing discussions that I think are healthy when, well, if somebody can hack a pipeline, or what happened in Texas a couple of years ago about there was fuel, but how come it didn't get there? How can we make sure that we extend life? And that's, to me, a discussion that's going to be ongoing. And that will discuss things like trustworthiness of AI, responsibility. Do we trust the machine only? And, you know, I think we'll all figure it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm curious.
And if you were a chief technology officer in the utility,
Yep.
What do you think of the future of the utility and the use of AI in it? Utilities are different from almost anything else. They're 24/7, like air traffic control. They're not much room to make a mistake or to rehearse.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that, AI, like many other innovations like cloud and, analytics and all that, finds its way where it makes a lot of sense. I think AI's sort of first foray into improvement, innovation, benefits, reduction of cost, increase of things. It will be all around consumer experiences. So utilities have a call center, utilities have a website, the whole payment thing, the whole how do I handle my dispute for the dollars that I want to pay, the bill, the this and the that. AI, through the big players, the Microsoft, the Oracles, the SAPs of the world will find its way into all those systems, Salesforce, what have you. So AI is already, proliferating all kinds of sectors. The question long term would be, will AI help design the next, coal fire power plant, or the next nuke, or the next, natural gas blaze system, or what have you. And that is really a long journey of how, those kind of tools can help innovation, from creating chips to everything else that eventually helps a utility do a better job of creating electrons, delivering electrons, and so on. So, but I think the first set of AI innovation that we're going to see is, hopefully, I would personally, Pete, and I don't know if you're working on this or not or seeing it, but I want my own personal assistant that I can pay 20 bucks, $100 bucks, $1,000 a month, that is my own Jarvis, like Iron Man, and he solves all my problems and he does all my things. And I walk around, and instead of having to worry about my laptop, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna call her, Katrina. So Katrina, please, I need to change my flight tonight, and I want to steak dinner with Llewellyn when I see him, and I'm gonna be late tomorrow. So the book club thing that I do in the morning and the Bible study got to be changed for the next day, and that's what I want. Is that coming? Is any working on that?
I would say there's 100% somebody is, and I've heard that example. That's a great example of, with Iron Man. I mean, Iron Man is still working with Jarvis, right? I mean, he or she or whatever is saying, I need the following, and Jarvis makes it happen. When it comes to, I think about cities, and maybe we can pivot into some of the stuff I know you are super, super excited about, and Llewellyn with smart grid. I mean, the word smart in front of a word now means interconnectivity. And yet we live in a world where we're saying zero trust, and the cloud and cybersecurity is all, but people who are tracking smart agriculture, precision medicine, technology is making that happen. And I always love the answer I received when I asked my colleague at Sandia National Lab, when they're talking about how these supercomputers that work at ridiculous speeds, that solve grand problems, challenges, tackle challenges, said, look, quintillion exponential machine learning technology, AI, it's not new. It's been around. What problem are we trying to solve? And we can put compute power at it. And we human beings need sleep. I like the fact that something could be running a AI model. So when I wake up, I can make sense of that with that binary information. And if it can help me with pattern recognition, or how to build a safer building so it doesn't collapse if there's an earthquake, or a safer car that's got hundreds of millions of lines of code in it today, to your point, Llewellyn, or it was you, Andres, about these are computers on wheels. We put a lot of trust, the driverless, the autonomous vehicle, like we want it, but are we really going to trust it? And I think I want to go on road trips when I'm really old and not worry about driving and pulling over for coffee. So for me, I think when we think of our cities, how is it benefiting our cities? This gets into the equity. And I think there's a big discussion about, where do you deploy smart lighting and smart capabilities so that those underprivileged, and we see a lot of this in the Justice 40 initiative and the movement the government's making to make sure that small businesses and disadvantaged communities and the equitable use of technology isn't just for certain factions of society. And these to me are the questions that I'd rather discuss, because there's some people in this country that don't have internet. I mean, think about that for a minute. And yet I've got more Wi-Fi than I need. The problem is it's always jumping from one thing to the other, and it's not even consistent. So back to our, we've got to architect, we've got to invest, and we have to implement, with like-minded people for a greater good, and recognize there's a lot of risk. And how do we mitigate the risk as we transform and innovate?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that, it's really fascinating to see how this disparate analog ecosystems like smart cities, smart utilities, smart buildings of the future are coming from, sort of analog homes that don't produce energy and are not connected. And all of a sudden, this whole infrastructure is going to be connected. And one of the most exciting things that I'm working on is what I call the flying economy. Drones, vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, vertiports. We at Texas State are driving the whole R&D journey of the next 2 years of how Texas is going to advance our mobility. And we predict 10,000 vertiports, 1 million vehicles flying every day, moving passengers, doing emergency response, moving goods, delivering all kinds of things. And the funny thing about it is that it's not going to happen, in 10 years or 2 years. It's actually starting in January 2025. And it's kind of Jetson-esque, for those of you that remember the Jetsons, how all the infrastructure and all the systems and all the elements of a society that is interconnected with all kinds of software and energy and water and transportation things are now all coming together. And to me, it's just fascinating to see, how the Legos fit together and create all kinds of new jobs, new opportunities. A lot of people never thought, for example, that the number one fastest growing money-making job description on the IRS tax return is a cryptocurrency farmer. Who would have thought that would be a job title? I'm a cryptocurrency farmer. And 5 years, 10 years from now, there'll be all these job titles that we never thought it could have existed. I mean, I don't know about you, Pete, but you just describe yourself as the I don't know, what was it that you said? The smart
connective
tissue guy?
Yeah, the connective tissue officer, CTO, but I was a chief technology officer.
Yeah, I know. It's like there's all these new ways of understanding, and more importantly, maybe you can talk about this from your perspective, but it's really about the business models and unleashing value and creating new benefits, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to preface
Yes.
going on with a quick question, which is something that concerns me, which is how the problem can be the solution. I'll give you an example. I'm inundated with environmental groups, largely young people, who hate natural gas, hate coal, hate oil, hate the fossil fuels, but they have an answer, which is alternative generation, which has its own set of problems, which they don't acknowledge yet. But to what extent can we turn the tables on that? The reason they don't like fossil fuels is largely because of carbon and other pollutants they put into the air. Can we turn the tables then, simply change the way we use the fossil fuels or extract the pollutants at time of combustion so they become virtues? Often I think we're looking, and I gave a very successful talk at NASA some years ago on don't look out of the box, look in the box. There's a lot of good stuff there. You don't have to get out of it yet. You've got to use the bits in the box. How do you feel about that? Using what would seem to be the problem as the solution?
Yeah, well, if I may, and I'm going to jump back to what I was so fortunate and blessed to be a part of when I joined the Department of Energy. There's this perception that which I call it the Department of Science. And if you've ever worked there, or for your listeners, it is an agency that's very misunderstood in an interesting way. When I got there within a week, I said, holy cow, I mean, I got to figure this place out. And one of the first things I did was try to understand the ecosystem of how the National Nuclear Security Administration, part of the DOE, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, dotted line to the DOE, the 17 national labs. We just all saw a movie called Oppenheimer. And if you did, there, I mean, Los Alamos, I've been there. I've seen where they built and discovered. And to be able to go to these places, these national treasures, to your point, Llewellyn, and know that there are people that get up every day and work on technology readiness levels that range from 1 to 9, meaning those problems. To me, the question about fuels and alternative, the word distributed energy resources is something that says, look, it's not one or the other. It's about resilience. If people want to say, I don't want coal, well, you know, Mother Nature doesn't always have the sun out, or maybe the water's got something going on. But the idea that we can have alternative or distributed energy resources that can work together, and the fact that we know really smart people at the federal national, or I should say the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado, or the National Energy Technology Laboratory in West Virginia, Pittsburgh, and Albany, Oregon, and the Idaho National Lab in Idaho, where they're doing nuclear research and so many things. People get up every day and go to work, just like our military, to defend our country and think about these problems. And if people wanted to know, they can go to these sites and go, holy cow. And that's why I'm such an ambassador and evangelist, if you will, for these places. Because when I hear people say, oh, you know, when are we going to have the next thing? There are people who are working to create R&D that will eventually be commercial.
Because I've been an advocate for the labs for a long time. I was a regular lecturer at Sandia, Livermore, and Los Alamos back in the 80s. And I just did a program for the United States Energy Association. I think it was last week, with 5 national lab directors. I think we don't know enough about them. I don't think we celebrate them enough, because I think, and I've written a column about this, that they are the great muscle in America's arm. And people don't know they did things like the human genome mapping. They were very critical in that.
Hey, Google, you know, the National Laboratory, 75 years of excellence, I think it is. And you'd see that, oh my gosh, that's where that was born. That's where that was figured out. These are national labs too. People think they are Department of Energy labs. I love the United States Department of Energy. They have their name on the lab. You know, they are used and leveraged across the world.
At the danger of showing my age, I first visited Los Alamos when it was part of the Atomic Energy Commission.
Thank you.
Then I visited when it was part of the Energy Research and Development Administration.
Hey, Llewellyn and Andres, I go 5 miles up the road to the DOE, where I had my office when I was there in Germantown, Maryland, the original facility before they built the Forrestal downtown. And you walk into that building at 19901 Germantown Road, and it says Atomic Energy Commission.
Yeah, I know.
Carved in marble on the wall.
And you know, the floor there is irradiated wood.
Well, fun fact from Llewellyn himself. No. So yes, I go back to, we need to feel good about, there are people looking to solve these problems at the clip. The NIST is right next to DOE, a couple miles down the road. We need standards, yes, but really smart people putting out information for us to consume. I was going to ask you, if I can, 2 of my favorite quotes, but the one for this purpose is Mark Twain: the man who does not read has no advantage over the man that cannot read. We have to be educated, whether you read or learn, and you trust that resource. Curiosity, yours, Llewellyn, yours, Andres, is what drives me. And if I'm learning and can convey that to somebody, whether it's on Wall Street, Silicon Valley, or at a utility, or a student, or somebody I'm mentoring, you want to create light bulbs and pay it forward. And right now, with so much tech we have to be able to say in 10 seconds or less or 15, why does AI matter? What's the impact it's going to have? What's cybersecurity? We have a lot of mile wide, inch deep conversations and too much content that confuses people. And I think, to your point, Llewellyn, leads back to the anxiety of what does all this mean? It's about what's the impact and what will it do to, in my line, I love to say, is extend life greater.
Yeah. I wanna do an interlude here and see if I can show you this. This is the hottest product at the Smart Cities Connect conference. It is a shower meter. It lasts 5 minutes. The dust will come down in 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes to shower. And I'm gonna start using this with my kids so that they learn about efficiency of use of water. And sometimes the solution is not, a rocket science, but just how we change behavior.
Yes.
And Llewellyn always talks about that, how we Americans are, dare I say, a bit barbarian compared to the Europeans about our explosive use of the environment. But I digress on one point real quick for the audience. And I always, when I hear these things, I tend to take the advantage. As a professor of smart grid at Texas State University, and having built the first smart grid at Austin Energy and build the grid in Dubai and Turkey, Brazil, and 17 states in the US. There is no dirty fuel. I have news break, flash, flash, flash. Carbon is fossilized wood. Wood comes from trees that come from solar energy through photosynthesis. The bad part about the carbon is that we burn it. And when you burn the carbon, the fossilized wood grown from trees using photosynthesis, you are liberating the molecules. So we just need to shift from burning to doing something else. But same with natural gas or oil. Oil are fossilized dinosaurs. Dinosaurs ate grass, trees, leaves. It's all solar power photosynthesis. There is no dirty fuel. Okay, it's all solar energy storage. And we just need to get smarter about how we do it and stop burning things, because burning releases CO2.
I've never heard it explained that way, but that's awfully interesting. I'm glad this is being recorded, because that's an opening line to a class that I'd like to share when I used to teach at the University of Maryland Graduate School. I want to just comment on that and go back to the Llewellyn, you brought up the distributed energy. And look, I mean, the innovations of turning natural resources into fuel, it's not one or the other. It really isn't. And that's why the word resilience is, in my view, is different from, but has become very prominent in we need not a reliable grid anymore. We need a reliable, sustainable, and resilient grid, and a secure grid, and a flexible grid. The Energy Systems Integration Facility, shout out to NREL, all my colleagues out there, but Juan Torres is leading some amazing work, who hails from Sandia. I've had a chance to go out there, and you go out and you see what their supercomputers are doing, and these amazing, 3D, if augmented reality, go inside of one of these, generators and understand how they're just trying to become more and more efficient about just the motors themselves, not building up this kind of crud so that it doesn't run efficiently. It's not binary. And that's my point. And I think it's important that we understand strengths, capabilities. And again, for our audience that sells products, I mean, bringing it back to my technology, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I met with companies in my 25 years in government who, I got the greatest thing since sliced bread. No, you don't. I hope you have something that complements the investments we've made so that we can maybe replace over time. But you can't tell me you have the one thing. And I think that's back to this. I think it was mentioned or I think it was Llewellyn, about we're very siloed. Some people call it cylinders of excellence. It's silos. And where are we cross-pollinating across? Because there's so much to consider when you buy products now. When a utility buys a solution, it's, Well, what's the privacy concerns? What's the cybersecurity concerns? What's the physical security concerns? What are the workforce concerns? Do people know how to operate this? There's just a lot. And nothing drives me more crazy than people thinking, I've got the one-stop shop solution. I'd rather say, who are you working with to help complement what the utilities invested in? Because they are not going to turn their grid off for a few weeks so that they can migrate to a smart grid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Llewellyn, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think this has been a conversation. I'd like to see more done on the anxiety issues. For example, the cell phone. It's a great source of anxiety when people realize that it tracks them. You look at detective shows today, every detective show, whether it's a true life detective show or it's a fictional one, what are the key things? Cell phones and cameras. They weren't around 25 years ago, and they contribute to the sense that you're never alone, that you're under surveillance, that the machines have taken over, not that they may, but that they have. And this is, I think, contributory. I read a very interesting piece once about a man who wanted to disengage. It was to do with Safra, the billionaire who was murdered, but he was a no good neck, but he wanted no record, no fingerprints, and he tried to make a life without any connection to anything, paying cash, not having. It was defeating. There is always some connection to the larger world. It is no longer possible to drop out, not in advanced society. And my final thought, which is, we're going to have to get these great technologies to help the third world. Otherwise, we're going to have the third world try to move to the first world. We're seeing it across the Mediterranean, we're seeing it across the border, the southern border. We've got to think in terms of how do we use the technologies to improve the quality of life and the quality of agriculture in the face of very small resources, changing climate, but the need for people to stay where they are, grow their crops there, and not unbalance the world. There's a huge migration, essentially, but not totally from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, although much of the migration across the Mediterranean is from the northern hemisphere, from North Africa. So any thoughts on how we can go forth and use our technological brilliance to stabilize the lives in countries where there is no stability whatsoever? And I can say that because I come from Africa and I know about it. And
Pete,
I think that
go ahead and chime in, Pete.
I was just going to say, Llewellyn, I was fortunate to lead a discussion a few weeks ago on climate change. And to me, that's more of an umbrella term, and AI is something that will hopefully enable it. But for your readers and listeners, Andres, the National Climate Resilience Framework is a really great read. I mean, it speaks to everything that you just mentioned, Llewellyn. And for me, I like to, I've one of my mentors once said, facts tell, stories sell. Reading and being able to say, look, there's a document you can read, but right in there, somebody put a pen to paper and said, it's not about climate being on one or the other side of the fence. There are bipartisan topics that over time, Mother Nature reigns supreme. And I think it's, again, when these natural and environmental disasters, some that we contribute to, but at the end of the day, you see a snowstorm coming or a hurricane coming or a tornado, that's when we realize, God forbid, but generally loss of life, what could we have done differently? And I think when we're tackling the climate and saying, how can we do more predictive modeling with AI? How can we secure that data so it doesn't get in the bad hands, so that people who are preparing for that disaster coming slowly on the coast can be, safer. That's to me where I think the technology component really can support, whether it's climate or medicine or safer food. I mean, the Baltimore disaster, the bridge. I mean, it's the stuff on those, on the ship. in the boxes are
Mhm.
what's in there, stuff people need. It's not going anywhere. It's disrupting supply chain. And that's
Yeah.
physical disaster. So I believe technology is an enabler. You mitigate risk when you're deploying it, because ultimately it should help transform. And my parting shot is, if you stay educated and informed, you're probably going to be enlightened. And that's
Well,
what
Yeah.
I
we all
could
do.
not disagree with you. I mean, technology going back to basically James Watt and the condenser, which made the steam engine viable and paved the way for making the mobile steam engine on the railroads with Stevenson. These were huge technological, which gave us the modern age, gave us shaft horsepower and transportation. What is the modern age built on? Shaft horsepower and transportation. Everything else is based on that. Get rid of those two and you have nothing. You have nothing. Yeah, you really actually are in terrible shape. You're going to probably marry somebody within 50 miles or 20 miles of where you were born, unless you're extraordinarily wealthy and can afford to travel. Education was limited to a very tiny segment of the upper part of society. And life, as Hobbes said, was short and brutish for most people.
Sure.
So I'm not against technology. I'm just wondering whether it isn't accelerated to a point so that it's frightening the people for whom it is designed. And there
Andres,
is this point I'm going to come back to that I made probably inexpertly about it has a certain imperial quality. I've invented this, it will prevail, and it does. And sometimes it
Yeah.
goes wrong, and sometimes we don't hear about it again. And if you, as you spend a lot of time in the national lab, so have I, and we've seen wondrous things that never made it into the market.
and maybe they
Mhm.
shouldn't, right? The
Maybe
valley
they
of
should
death,
have.
I mean, the valley of death exists for a reason, but there are people trying to build a bridge, a chasm, so that some of that stuff does, because there's a lot on the cutting room floor that we have missed. Andres, I want to say one thing to Llewellyn's point. I know you want to close
Yeah.
out here in a minute. The pandemic was an inflection point.
Mhm.
The whole world changed, right? I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, a health crisis taught us that, hey, I can get to Andres and Llewellyn, and I don't have to worry about getting on a plane and going doing an interview somewhere.
Right.
Technology is an enabler, and it's
Mhm.
transformed the buying and selling industry of IT.
Oh yeah.
For some, it's I want to be there. I want to press the flesh. Well, guess what? It's a lot easier to get to people now all across the globe because of the ability to use the internet protocol. For me, I
Mhm.
was at Department of Education, and you asked me about success stories. I mean, being at the Department of Education, where I helped lead and run the data center as a techie geek telecommunications guy from Johns Hopkins, where I got my master's degree, wanting to understand how it worked. Distance learning was like huge. I can use
Mhm.
Cisco routers and switches to communicate and teach over the
Mhm.
internet. Like those were success and are success stories that we sometimes
Mhm.
forget the leaps and the bounds we've made. So I just want to echo, things have happened in history that technology has shown us that
Mhm.
it can create opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the biggest example of that in terms of benefits or wealth creation, a lot of people remember that Willis Carrier in 1902 in Buffalo invented the motor for the air conditioning, and he didn't make a lot of money out of that, but Coca-Cola, refrigerating a beverage, has made a ton of money doing that using that invention. And it's kind of funny how certain technologies become pervasive and platforms for others to build on top, and on and on and on. And we stand on top of that with Zoom now and other things. But don't want to leave the broadcast without knowing, Pete, what's going on in your neck of the woods and your company and you. What's in front of you the next 6 months? Any events, any activities, any projects, anything you want to share?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of I wake up every Sunday and look at my week ahead, and there are things that pop up. My company, my business is one that is driven by where there's a need and I can maybe fill that gap, it's always exciting. And for me, look, I sit on the IoT advisory board for NIST. I'm part of the utility. I lead the utility supercluster for the smart cities and connected communities community. I have some work at some federal public sector agencies. I do a lot of advising. I've created Bits, Bytes, and Insights, the newsletter. I'm looking to build my model, my dots and bridges around a subscription-based service offering where, you know, I've got hundreds of videos and I don't know if people watch them, but I think even now it's what can I give people to use as educational tools? And hopefully by the end of the year, that's going to be the model that I have moving forward. Heck, I may go back to government in a couple of years. I have 5 years to give. But for the next 6, 7 years, months, I should say, yeah, I'm going through the pivot of my new business model and still maintaining my advisory consulting, along with, you know, doing roundtables and webcasts like you, for profit and for some nonprofit purposes. It's the academic in me and the teacher in me, and I feel very honored to be here with you and just to be on the other side of the mic, Andre. So I take life one day at a time, man. That's all we got.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you know, you should know that it's a pleasure to have you at the Digital Roundtable. We will promote these videos, and these videos have, you know, we have thousands of subscribers on our free Digital 360 Summit YouTube channel. And we also have our annual conference coming up, the Digital 360 Summit 2024. Is going to be in Austin. It's going to be a fabulous event. More to come on that, but we will be circling back with you. Maybe you can participate and join us. Llewellyn, I don't know if there is anything else you want to share. I feel like we missed, unfortunately. Yeah, but I think we missed the fact that you didn't get to quarrel with John Butler at all. You want to have a little.
I had to send him a poison email or two. I'm going to ask him if he tripped over a bar room on the way here. And we don't have any music. Who's going to play the guitar? Nobody criticizes.
I think you and Pete are going to do a cappella of something.
Hey, hanging out with Llewellyn is never a dull moment, man. And thank you. I mean, without Llewellyn, I wouldn't have met you, Andre. So, you know, the world's an interesting place.
It's good to have you on. It's good to discuss the velocity. I don't think anything happens unless there's some kind of philosophical background to it. You can call it something else. You can call it purpose, but it's really a philosophy. Once you've got an idea, things evolve from there. Without the idea, nothing happens. And it's very good to exchange ideas. I think this has been a very constructive and interesting session.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I will also say that the ideas and the sparks of the conversation, it's really what ignites the thinking process of the agent that changes things. And so when I see Pete and what Pete does and has been doing all his life, he's a change agent. And he loves to steer in the pot and pushing things and making things happen. And so are we. And so here for the change agents of the world, and don't stop.
Well, do me a favor, fellas. I always say there's a story behind every selfie. If I can get a smile on 3 from you two, I'd appreciate it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Done. I'm going to just say something nice about these two awesome folks. So, man, I hope we get to talk again. Llewellyn, anytime you want to grab some coffee, brother, inside of the Beltway, I'd love to see you, pal.
Okay, wonderful. Likewise, by the way, likewise.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. We'll see you.
Love it. Take care. Bye-bye.